In this video, I'll share how to solidify and cement your progress in resisting anxiety and OCD, a process you have undergone or will undergo through exposure therapy, the most effective tactic against obsessive fears. Let me remind you that exposure and response prevention is a strategy where you systematically engage in actions that trigger fear, allowing you to gradually become accustomed to the frightening stimulus. From my observations, many patients who persistently work in therapy reach a point where they can perform everyday personal and professional routines normally. Encouraged by the apparent retreat of their illness, they happily abandon their exposures. As a result, they encounter a severe and seemingly unexpected relapse weeks or months after this relief. Today, we will explore why this happens and how to prevent it. I believe that watching this video guide will be beneficial both for those who have already faced such a setback after initial improvement and for those just beginning their journey with exposures. It's better to know in advance the challenges you might face. Most of my clients, with the understandable goal of freeing themselves from OCD, harbor a mistaken perception of what true freedom entails. If asked what state they want to achieve, their response would most likely be,
"I want these frightening thoughts to stop appearing in my head."
And this is perfectly natural, given that obsessions prey upon personal values. You can find out why certain distressing thoughts arise and what this says about you in a separate video, how OCD picks its targets. We as CBT therapists strive to gradually modify this tempting yet misleading objective, guiding our patients towards achieving not just elimination of thoughts, but rather a more neutral relationship with them. Fighting the thoughts makes them more significant to us. I think since you are watching my channel, you already understand this, as it's the very foundation of OCD's architecture. So to achieve a neutral relationship with thoughts, we need to commit to refraining from compulsions and accepting any obsessions that arise. It requires enduring the fear they provoke, allowing ourselves to feel uncertainty and resisting the urge to ritualistically reassure ourselves. This essential work is described in every self-help guide. If exposure therapy is done thoroughly, the significance of intrusive thoughts gradually diminishes, as does the need to combat them. Fear decreases, and a sense of returning to a normal life emerges. And this is where most people stop among those who reach this stage. But quite often, this state proves deceptive. OCD can allow you to catch a fleeting glimpse of recovery, a subtle hint that things might be improving, only to suddenly resurge with renewed intensity. This can be a very disheartening experience, leading to a pessimistic outlook. Now let's discuss how to prevent this. We are now approaching a more advanced realm of knowledge about OCD, and we will talk not about how to defend against the disorder, but how to counterattack it. OCD is a cunning and persistent internal adversary whose goal is to torment you endlessly. And this enemy will sometimes attack openly, sometimes hide in ambush, creating an illusion of safety before pouncing once you are off guard. In these circumstances, the only way to vanquish this enemy once and for all is to act preemptively. What does this mean? It entails deliberately choosing actions you'd rather avoid in your usual daily life. Anyone would happily settle into hard-earned peace from earlier stages of resisting OCD. After weeks or months of pushing back against compulsions, you just want to forget those horrors and engage in normal thoughts. But to stay ahead in exposures, we should provoke anxiety and discomfort as often and as intensely as we can at this point. Even the most distressing thoughts should become your training ground. For example, are there severe intrusive thoughts about harming your loved ones? Then provoke these thoughts several times a day and gradually get used to them. Does your brain conjure up scenarios about contracting dangerous illness because you didn't wash your hands? Then reduce your visits to the sink and the use of soap to a minimum. Perhaps even stop washing your hands entirely for a while. We need to use exposures to fill the spaces where OCD could establish itself. Strategically plan your steps as if you are in a chess match, always a few moves ahead. Occasionally ask yourself, where will OCD strike next? How will it try to scare me? You need to address those areas before OCD gets there. I'm not suggesting you get overly focused on this. Let's not turn this process into compulsion. Opportunities for advanced exposures are often readily apparent. A good example of wide-reaching OCD prevention is challenging magical thinking. Magical thinking is the belief that your words, actions, or thoughts can affect reality through mechanisms unexplained by physics or logic. It often manifests as irrational ideas, traditions, or superstitions. Magical thinking very often provides fertile ground for obsessive weeds to grow. OCD might, for instance, urge you to meticulously follow rituals that either bring luck or ward off bad luck, elevating such thoughts and making a mountain out of a molehill. An example of preventative exposure would be to break these magical rules in every possible situation. Select unlucky numbers like 13. Ignore all superstitions. Let yourself think about bad events and silently wish ill upon yourself and loved ones. The ideal outcome of such work would be complete independence from superstitions, allowing you to smile indulgently the next time you see a horseshoe on someone's door. If we are talking about panic attacks, claustrophobia, or fear of flying, the same principles apply. If you fear being in places where immediate medical help is unavailable, you likely have trouble with a range of situations. You might struggle in traffic jams, getting stuck in elevators, or enduring a moment where a subway train stops in a tunnel between stations. Let's say you've already made progress in expanding your comfort zone to the point where you can remain at ease in various locations around the city. But if you want to truly solidify that progress, your next challenge should be to venture beyond the city limits. Head out into the woods and place yourself in the wild where there is no cell phone service. For many people with panic attacks, a kind of graduation exam for exposure is taking a boat out on a large body of water. If, for example, in overcoming your fear of flying, you've managed to push yourself to take short domestic flights, then to truly reinforce your achievement, you'll need to take a transatlantic flight, even if the circumstances don't actually require you to travel that far. For true liberation from fear, you should choose the most challenging practices, even those actions that aren't strictly necessary at the moment. In every exposure, you should push yourself beyond desired norm. Think of it like packing for a long trip. You would prefer not just bringing the essentials, but adding a few extra items you might not need right away. It may feel unnecessary at the time, but when unexpected situations arise, you'll be glad you have those supplies to rely on. Following ethical guidelines as a therapist, I do not insist that my patients push themselves this hard. Yet here on this channel I'm able to firmly urge you, damn it, get a grip, kick yourself into gear and do that difficult exposure that you are so afraid of, the one you don't even want to think about. OCD and anxiety disorders are treacherous enemies that are absolutely ruthless towards you. No one but yourself can pull you out of this trap. You are in a cage with a tiger, and just because that tiger fell asleep doesn't mean you are safe forever. You need to finish it off or it will eat you piece by piece.